Hello, Ibrahim. Ibrahim Umar
Wase.
Wasir. It's nice to meet you here in Oka, Anambra State at DDM Studio. You know, it's interesting. I think we met for the first time 3 days ago at Abuja Airport. We had just gotten a flight to come to Anambra State, and we got just to start. We got chatting. We talked about education, your background. We talked about culture. We talked about poverty rate, and what's basically happening among the real life people and the real life problems they face. But of all the things that we discussed, one thing that you said that really made impact on me is the rate of poverty, not only in Nigeria but also in the rest of Africa. But first of all, for the sake of our audience, let's know you again. So, who is Ibrahim Umar Wasir?
Thank you for having me. Good evening, Nigerians. My name is Ibrahim Umar Wase. I am from Plateau State. I was born in Enugu when my father was serving, and I was raised in Plateau State. I studied in Bauchi and Kano State, and I served in Delta. I do business sometime in Lagos, which made me to be to travel across all the lengths and breadths of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And we met with Dr.
Is it me you're talking about?
Yes.
I'm not a doctor. I'm just Mr. Daniel.
Mr. Daniel Elobam.
Yeah.
And as he said, on the airport from Abuja to Anambra, and we had a fruitful discussion with him. And
one of the things you told me was that you did your national youth service in Asaba.
Yes.
Right? So how do you find, the idea? Is it, okay, you're born in Enugu actually, so it's
Yes.
not much of culture.
No, I left, my father retired when I was actually young. I was only 4. So I had nothing to say about, I had no experience to show for my for me being born in Enugu State.
Okay.
But when I came to Asaba, this an interesting story that I will never forget.
Yes.
I left Kano on the 22nd of October 2021 to come to Asaba for my youth service. And on that very day, my father passed away.
Wow.
I had to leave and went to my village, that's Wase.
Wow.
For all the tradition. In Islamic culture, at the time that the person died, immediately we buried him. So I went straight to Wase for his burial, and I left. The trauma and the experience, the stereotype that's going around in the north about southern part of Nigeria. Met my family. Some of my family members were crying before I left that maybe I was going to the monsters are beasts. I'm not coming back home. So that gave me that impression that when I come to southern part of Nigeria, I'm going to stay. I'm not going to leave.
Wow.
I'm going to experience for myself and see what I was told since when I was a child.
Okay, and then you told me that your favorite soup
Yes.
is what
yeah. And I met a lot of wonderful people in Asaba, and met a lot of wonderful friends there during my youth service. And that experience made me to have a complete different idea from what I learned when I was a child, from the stereotype that was going around that maybe the people of southern part of Nigeria hate us, they don't like us, or the idea that they are very cruel, fraudulent, all these kind of things that has been flying in the north. And I deemed it pertinent to be an advocate, to start championing for unity instead of hatred. I feel it's high time for us, especially we Nigerians, to start thinking of way forward for us.
All right, so one of the things that we discussed about that made an impact on me, and actually why I said let's have this conversation publicly, is the issue of children poverty in Africa, the high child poverty rate. But when you mention it, it's worrying. So what do you think about the high incidence of children poverty or child poverty rate in Africa? Can you give us the facts and data again?
Yeah, we have more than 54% of Nigerian children are living in abject poverty.
Abject poverty. How do you
Yes.
define abject poverty?
Below poverty line, according to the line stipulated by the National Multidimensional Poverty Index.
Now, that's big grammar again. What is multi-dimensional poverty?
Multi-dimensional poverty, to dissect it, I think multi-dimensional poverty in a simple term is the way somebody lives in
Leave that earlier. You know, I'm asking because I always prefer breaking things down in practical terms. Because when we speak big English, it kind of hides the ugly face of poverty. So now, if for instance, a person is not able to feed 3 times in a day, is that multidimensional poverty?
That's what multidimensional.
What if he's unable to feed 2 times a day?
He can't even provide for the next meal.
So what even he cannot eat once a day?
Is also part of the multidimensional.
And then some people cannot even eat one square meal a day.
Yes. And northern part of Nigeria account for 67.4% of that poverty.
But you said 57% of Nigerian children live in poverty.
Yes.
But in northern Nigeria is actually
67.4%
of that 54%.
Of that 54% of the children living in abject poverty.
What does that mean in actual terms? So first, do these children go to school?
Most of the children have no access to quality education and health care. Most of the children that are living in the areas that are bedeviled by insecurity doesn't even have access to they are malnutrition. So most of the children have a lot of problem depending on the society they are living in.
How does that affect their health?
Definitely it affects their health in a great deal, because you know, if you're not sound, the environment itself contributes to how you think and how you do a lot of things.
And of course, in that case, the mortality rate will be high as well. The
mortality rate will definitely be high. As it is always, if you look at the out-of-school children also, it's also alarming. We have 18 million children in Nigeria that are out of school.
Out of school?
Yes.
And when you say out of school, it's not out of university or secondary school, it's out of primary school.
Primary school.
So we are breeding 18 million children who will not have the benefit of going to primary school.
Primary school. And the question is, are we, you know, education is something that will radicalize people. And if people lack the basic education, they can easily fall into every kind of criminality. So the best way to reduce criminality is squarely addressing the issue of education and poverty.
All right. What about the South? What is the rate of what is the poverty rate in southern Nigeria?
It's 42.4%.
In other words, 42% of families in southern Nigeria also experience multidimensional poverty. And some of them cannot have just 1 square meal in a day.
Sure.
Do you have the percentage of out-of-school children in southern Nigeria as well?
I can't say.
But the point is, it doesn't really matter whether it is 57% in the north or 42% in the south. 10% of children being out of school is really, really bad.
It's really
but we are talking of, if there are 60 million children in Nigeria, for instance, I don't have the fact, we can find out soon if we want to. But you're looking at having 10 million children out of school.
10 million.
So why are we now complaining of high incidence of kidnapping and armed robbery? Is that not where all these things stem from?
That's where it ultimately comes from. If you look at the region that are suffering from insecurity, for example, you'll find out that they account for the high number of illiteracy and poverty. Northwest, for example, that are suffering from banditry and kidnapping, and Northeast are suffering from terrorism, the
Okay.
Boko Haram terrorists,
All right.
they account for the highest number of poverty
Out of school children.
and out of school children. Also, the child abuse, you see many Almajiri children on the streets without anybody to take good care of them.
Okay, we'll come to this Alamajiri issue because actually many people around the world may not understand what the Alamajiri system is. I don't know whether it is within the purview of this conversation. Maybe we'll come to that. But isn't it the responsibility of government to provide basic education for these children?
Clearly it is.
Because I remember when I was young, far back in 1977, Nigeria has universal basic, that is universal free primary education system. Back in 1977,
Yes.
it was declared then. So I don't know, is it still obtainable now? Or is it backed by law?
It's no longer news that leadership as a leaders in Africa, not only Nigeria, leadership as a leaders. And we are suffering from poor governance and lack of direction since, most especially since when APC took the governance of this country. But I think the government should focus rather on the culture, because for me, Nigeria is a complete lawless society and we're suffering from this lawlessness. That drives us to the issue of culture you talk about in the first place.
Yeah. Okay, well, without wanting to delve into the political aspect of this matter,
Yes.
so do you think that culture plays a big role in the incidence of poverty in Nigeria, especially as it relates to children?
It plays a role.
How?
It plays a role. Because, environment, you have to understand the environment is the most important component in life. And
Right.
every fruit comes from a certain environment. Environment is part of the thing that you can't do without.
Right.
For example, if you have a dream and you want that dream to come to reality, you need an environment. So that environment is a product of culture. What's the culture of the people? You need to understand something about culture.
Yes.
Old nations manifest their uniqueness through culture. That's mean, in other words, culture is observable. You can see culture by looking at me. You can easily say I'm a Hausa man.
Yeah, at least you are cap with say so, okay.
And you can easily spot me out of million anywhere in the world that this man is a Nigerian. He's definitely a Hausa man.
Right.
And also, culture creates the people, and people creates the culture. Culture is so strong, and I'm sorry, culture is so strong that it creates the people initially. And then that is being created by the people firstly, then you start creating the people. Your children, for example, you don't teach them how to be your culture. They grow up in it. But the culture was created by some people at some point. Tend to have this ingrained aversion for anything that has to do with Western culture is because of the crusade. If you heard about the crusade,
I know, yeah.
When some
The Christian crusades of
crusaders
the Middle Ages.
Yeah. So Andalusia, that's the Spain, current Spain, was once a Muslim country under the Ottoman Empire.
Yes.
So it was during the crusade that the Christians in Europe wiped away the traces of this Muslim culture and tradition in Europe, and also the Jewish culture, not just Muslim culture, but also the Jewish culture in Europe. And due to that distrust, it makes it very hard for a northerner to accept anything from the West. It is more or less they conquered us, and we will accept it by force. So anything that is coming from them, that is that ingrained distrust. So, and the people of southern part of Nigeria accept more of Western culture than the northerners. So they easily accept it, and we doesn't imbibe into that culture of tolerance in Nigeria. I believe that acceptance is not approval.
Let me get this. In other words, in northern Nigeria, they found it difficult to accept Western education.
Yes, to some reasonable extent. That was the reason why the South happened to be higher in terms of Western education than the Northerners. But now Now people has accepted it. But before,
So is improved education
yes.
now, is it improving the situation
Yeah,
on the
improved
ground?
education is improving, but the system we are practicing also is also contributing to, because these politicians, they are leveraging on our vulnerabilities, and part of the vulnerabilities are the illiteracy and the poverty. Poverty, in tribalism, and religion are the potent tool used by these politicians to keep ruling. So they don't want people to be educated. They don't want people to be enlightened. They don't want people to have a source of livelihood that will make them think for themselves. They want them to be offering always to these people so that they will control and always manipulate them.
Okay, once again, without going into the politics of it, how do you think the situation can be improved?
It can be improved if we decisively and constructively iron these two components, the issue of insecurity and the issue of poverty.
Insecurity and poverty.
Yes.
So of course, you will say that the high incidence of insecurity in Nigeria has again magnified and contributed to the high poverty rate.
The high poverty rate, yes.
Especially in areas of the north where famine is a way of life, isn't it?
Yes. And also education. We should also consider education. Although the issue of education is continuous, poverty is immediate. We need to tackle poverty immediately. There is a saying that an idle mind is a devil workshop. We have more than 20 million graduates roaming the streets without job. So how do you expect these people to live? Everyone wants to live. So, and this is part of the problem, or the crux of the problem.
Okay, what about business investment? Do you think that if businesses invest more in wealth creation, that it will improve the situation?
It definitely, because if everybody has something to do, nobody will think of carrying a gun to go and attack anybody.
And then government, what practical solutions should government bring into the picture?
The government should first and foremost focus on the youth, reduce unemployment rate, provide jobs for the youth, and probably the insecurity, try to address the insecurity and improve healthcare and education.
What role do you see for religion? Because you mentioned the culture, and obviously the Christian culture in the south and the Muslim culture in the north. This clash of cultures is also a big bridge. Do you think so?
It should, definitely. But what I believe is that according to the research I made,
okay,
we are not following the religion, as a matter of fact. We are only following what we want to follow. Because all this religion across the board, they teach us one fundamental thing, which is love. But are we loving each other? The answer is definitely no. We don't love each other. And if you go to the mosques and churches, in most cases, oftentimes, they preach hatred to their followers.
They preach hatred?
Definitely, they preach hatred.
How?
You have the incidents whereby a cleric or a pastor will ask you not to vote in terms of leadership for competence, but rather for somebody who
from your own religious side.
Religion. This is hatred at its core, because I can't withstand a person who doesn't trust me, who doesn't think I deserve justice or any right in my own country or body.
Right. So in other words, the religious leaders should start preaching love.
The real teaching of their creeds, rather than focusing on what they, because I realize that they taunt more of politicians. They are manipulating the people. To understand politics is to understand the dimension of manipulating people. How can you manipulate to gain what you want to get? There is 4 basic manipulation in politics, and these 4 basic manipulation, we call them rice. R-I-C-E. The
R-I-C-E, rice.
Yes.
The rice that I eat.
The rice, the spelling is the rice you eat, but it carries different meaning.
Okay.
The R stands for reward.
Okay.
Some people are motivated by reward.
All right.
What are they going to get? So if you're going to give them what they will get, and what they will get doesn't necessarily mean money. It can mean women or anything that you can offer them. The I stand for ideology. People can do crazy things
Reward
in the midst
ideology.
of what they believe.
Yes, them.
Then
Reward
C,
ideology, I get that. Okay, C.
coercion.
Coercion.
Yes. Some people, you can force someone to do what you want him to do,
Okay.
and unwillingly, but by force.
Yes.
Maybe that's the side of blackmailing, and because you have something that will tarnish his reputation. That's the coercion part. Then the last E stands for ego. What?
Sorry?
Ego.
Ego.
Ego. Yes.
All right, okay, go. All right,
Yes.
correct.
What he thinks of himself.
Good.
What his reputation stands for. So most people doesn't want to lose their reputation, so that they can do anything for what they want people
To protect their name.
Yeah, to protect their name and what they believe people see them for.
Right.
So politicians usually use these four tools to manipulate and get what they want. You understand that politics is an emotional investment. So once you invest in it, you get what you want. And in the cycle of the politicians, those who understand the game, you need to play this game or these four rules. I think the reward and probably coercion is the two tools you use against politicians. While for the masses, the ideology, if a cleric stand in the mosque and tell them that God has said this, and that, they can't go against it.
Okay, well, now that you've mentioned it, one of the things I noticed that, because my first question is about what individuals can do to kind of liberate themselves from poverty.
Yes.
And now, do you find it troubling that Nigerians are more flocking to religion rather than maybe doing something like education, creativity, developing skills that will leave them out of poverty and running to their pastors and imam for prayers?
No, religion is a product of man trying to find his purpose, the reason for his survival on this planet Earth. So I believe everyone is religious. Because if you look at the concept of religion, we worship, every one of us worship something or someone, whether we choose to accept it or not. I don't see that people are just running to religion, but we, as I said earlier, we are not practicing the religion as it's supposed to be practiced. And again, we are not applying logic in practicing our religion. For example, there are things that you're supposed to do yourself. God has endowed you with the capabilities to do that thing, but you go to God and pray for him. Just literally, like your child, you offer him all the necessary financial to take care of himself.
Yeah.
Then you come back to you for finance. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So you are strong. If somebody attacks you, you are to protect yourself. That's the essence of your strength. And that's the reason why God gave you that strength. Why are you going back to God?
All right. Thank you, Ibrahim Wase. It's been a very interesting conversation. I believe that I still have some time here, so we'll have maybe a different aspect of this conversation, especially when you spoke at the airport about, the Greek civilization, Roman civilization, and Western civilization, and their impact on African civilization.
Yes.
But people don't think about African civilization.
Yeah,
they think that Africa had no civilization before.
Yes.
But there was an African civilization.
Yes, that made me to think about a story that I read about, in Encyclopedia Britannica, they write something that the political science and political conflicts evolve around that one single question: who should have power and over who? For over 5,000 years, eminent human brains have tried to answer this question, but it proved to be impossible to answer because no sustainable solution have been found up to date. But there were people that tried to answer this question, and they were the Greek during the Hellenistic periods. I know most of the people during that Greek Hellenistic period, you know them all, heard about them. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. They wrote a lot of things about leadership, who should have power, who's supposed to be a leader, who's supposed to follow a leader. And there are some few things that still survive today in our culture. The Greek belief, and up to date, it's become the foundation of our leadership up to date. That leadership is a product of natural endowment. That you are endowed by God, by the divine God, with a certain characteristics that makes you a leader or a slave. That leads us to the second theory, according to the Greek. The Greek believe that leadership is a product of birth traits, real birth traits, biological traits. And they write in their scrolls that the traits are sharp-pointed nose, fair skin, blonde hair, thin lip, and blue eye.
Well, I think is that a Greek philosophy or the philosophy of the Aryan race that was espoused by Germany before the Second World War?
It is the Greek philosophy because the Hellenistic period lasted came before the German you're talking about. And all these German, England, Belgium, France, they are all part of the Great Roman Empire. And the Great Roman Empire adopted the leadership philosophy of the Greek when they conquered Greek. They read about their schools, all their findings. The Greeks were the first civilization to document the systematic study of human behavior. They put down all these control mechanisms on how to control people, everything, they put it down. And the Romans conquered them at a point. When they conquered them, they adopted the philosophy of the Greek. When they adopted the philosophy of the Greek, this is part of the philosophy, and they believe it with religious devotion. This birth trait, that's why now in Europe, forget about the level of degree you have. You might be a PhD holder, but deep down in the psyche of a European, you just think you are just a well-educated citizen.
Well, anyway, we can have that further conversation. I think it falls outside the purview of this method, but that is actually a conversation I would like to have with you: the influence of Greek culture on Roman culture, and the influence of Roman culture on Western culture, and then the difference between the Mediterranean culture, because I think, because today Greece is part of Europe, but 1,000 years or 2,000 years ago, there's actually a Mediterranean. The Greeks found themselves part of the Mediterranean world. Then, although eventually things started, civilization started moving towards Europe, but that's the conversation I think we can explore in the future. So thank you very much again, Mr. Ibrahim, for having you. It's a pleasure. I would like to drink more from the well of your knowledge at another time. Yeah. Thank you. And that's the much we can have today, our guests. We look forward to having you again at Philosophical or Cultural Conversation at DDM. Thank you.